Most people think making the first $10,000 is simply a matter of discipline, that it's about cutting unnecessary spending, working harder, or waiting long enough for the numbers to slowly stack. But the reality is more mechanical than motivational, because the first $10,000 exists in a completely different financial universe than the money that comes after it. The strange thing about wealth is that the beginning feels brutally slow, almost unfairly slow, while later stages seem to accelerate with a force that looks effortless from the outside. And this creates one of the biggest psychological distortions in money. People assume wealth is linear, when in reality, it behaves more like momentum. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of the same system. One person has zero savings and lives month to month, every paycheck arriving already assigned to rent, food, debt, transportation, and unexpected emergencies, while the other person has $10,000 stored and untouched, sitting quietly as financial oxygen. The difference between them is not just the number in the account, but the amount of pressure each person experiences every day, because money at low levels is less about wealth and more about reducing fragility. This is where financial psychology begins to matter more than financial knowledge. At zero, every decision carries weight. A broken phone becomes a crisis. A medical bill becomes debt. A missed week of work becomes instability. The absence of savings creates urgency, and urgency changes behavior. In behavioral economics, scarcity narrows cognitive bandwidth, reducing long-term planning and increasing short-term decision-making, which means the less money someone has, the harder it becomes to make wealth-building decisions, not because they lack discipline, but because the system around them forces immediate survival. That is why the first $10,000 feels unnatural. It requires fighting against financial gravity while carrying the full weight of life expenses. If someone saves $200 a month, reaching $10,000 takes over 4 years, assuming no setbacks, no emergencies, and no interruptions, which almost never happens in real life. The process feels invisible because the numbers move slowly, and humans are not naturally wired to stay motivated by delayed feedback. We respond to visible progress, and early wealth accumulation rarely provides that. The math becomes more revealing when you compare saving to compounding. If a person builds $10,000 and invests it at an average annual return of 7%, that money can generate $700 a year without additional labor. That number sounds small at first, but what matters is the structural change. Money has started participating. Before $10,000, all income came from labor. After $10,000, capital begins contributing, even if quietly. This is the threshold effect. The first wealth threshold is not about becoming rich. It is about creating the first layer of self-reinforcing capital. At $10,000, a person gains optionality. Emergencies no longer automatically create debt. Opportunities become easier to act on. Risk becomes less dangerous. Decision-making becomes less emotional. In economic terms, the person has moved from pure income dependence into early capital participation. Historically, this pattern has repeated across generations. During the Industrial Revolution, the people who accumulated even small amounts of capital early gained access to ownership structures that wage earners could not. And over time, those ownership structures multiplied wealth faster than labor alone ever could. The principle remains unchanged today, even if the tools look different. Ownership scales differently than effort. What makes the next 100,000 easier is not that the world becomes generous, but that the system changes shape. If someone reaches $10,000 and continues adding $200 a month while compounding continues at 7%, the path toward 100,000 becomes less dependent on pure contribution and increasingly influenced by growth. The machine becomes cooperative. Early on, you push the wheel. Later, the wheel helps push itself. Psychologically, this creates a dangerous illusion when observing wealthy people. Looking at someone with significant assets often makes the journey appear smooth, but it hides the brutal asymmetry of the beginning. The effort required to go from 0 to 10,000 is often greater than the effort required to go from 100,000 to 200,000, not in hours worked, but in resistance faced. The first stage has maximum friction and minimum visible reward. There is also an identity shift embedded inside this threshold. Before savings, a person often sees money as temporary, something that arrives and leaves. After reaching a meaningful reserve, money begins to feel like infrastructure, something stable enough to build on. That psychological transition matters because behavior follows identity. People who see themselves as builders make different decisions than people who see themselves as survivors. The modern economy complicates this further because it is designed around constant consumption. Subscription models, fast credit systems, frictionless spending, and social comparison create an environment where holding capital feels less rewarding than spending it. This makes the first wealth threshold even harder because the system monetizes impatience. The person trying to save 10,000 is often resisting an entire economic machine optimized for immediate consumption. This is why wealth thresholds are less about money and more about system position. 0 to 10,000 is the phase where discipline fights entropy. 10,000 to 100,000 is where structure begins to matter more than sacrifice. Beyond that, scale changes again, and capital becomes increasingly efficient. But none of those later stages exist without the first threshold. The mistake many people make is underestimating how important the first threshold really is. They compare their early progress to someone else's later stage and conclude they are failing, when in reality, they are operating in the hardest part of the curve. Wealth curves are steepest at the start because the system has not yet begun to support itself. If there is one thing to understand about money mechanics, it is this. The first 10,000 is not powerful because of its size, but because it changes the relationship between labor, time, and capital. It is the point where money stops being only something you earn and starts becoming something that can work alongside you. And that shift, however small it looks on paper, changes the trajectory of everything that follows. If this way of thinking about money changed how you see wealth building, leave a comment with the number you're currently building toward, whether it's your first 1,000, your first 10,000, or beyond. And if you want more breakdowns on the hidden systems behind money, wealth, psychology, and economic mechanics, like the video and subscribe. Because understanding the system often matters more than moving faster inside it. The hardest part of wealth is rarely the math itself. It is surviving the slow beginning long enough for the math to begin working in your favor. When that shift happens, the journey does not become easy, but it becomes fundamentally different, and that difference changes everything. The wheel finally moves with you, not against you. Momentum replaces resistance. Capital becomes a partner instead of a goal, and the system begins supporting the builder. That difference changes everything.